I'm telling you two stories, and they are related. There's one story leads to another. One is about my experience growing up in communist China and my education during the Cultural Revolution. And my second story is my search for the root of critical race theory. Um, Now, the reason I use a Spectre Is Haunting America is because it is the first sentence in the Manifesto of the Communist Party, authored by Marx and his comrade Engels. Now, Engels actually was a capitalist, so he kind of financed Marx to do his work. So he started with this: a specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. A specter is a ghost, is a spirit. And so it started in Europe and started actually in the European universities, and eventually get spread out through Europe. And there was a big fight. Actually, for example, in Germany, there was a fight between communists and the Nazis. The Nazis actually took power, which is unfortunate for Germany. And but somehow communism didn't work in West Europe, and it actually went over to Russia. And the flag here is the Communist Party International. So their goal since the beginning is not just for one country, it's for the whole world. And that specter went to Russia and China, and then many other countries like Cuba and North Korea and things like that. But everywhere it went, it brought destruction and misery. So for the former Soviet Union, it started in 1922 and ended in 1991, and 34 to 40 million people were murdered. Now, the picture here is actually Ukrainian children during the Great Famine, the Great Ukrainian Famine. And I think many of us heard the word Holocaust, but not only few of us heard Holodomor, which is called terror famine. That's killed many Ukrainians, starved to death. And the thing is, Ukraine used to be, Ukraine was a very rich agriculture country, and it's a major importer, major exporter of wheat and to Europe. So it's hard to imagine that they have such a famine and so many people died, millions of people, but we just don't know because it was not, nobody kept the record. So, and nobody even allowed to talk about it. And one of the reasons that Holodomor was little known in America is because the Western journalists hide that truth. So that's why not many people know about it. And then it went to China. Sorry, it's not 1994, it's actually 1949. So it's 1949 to present. Now 40 to 80 million people died of unnatural causes. And during the so-called land reform, that's when the Communist Party forcefully took lands from landowners and gave to the peasants. And about 1 to 4 million landowners were executed. And just for a short period of time, just maybe 3 or 4 years, the parents get what the Communist Party promised them is to give their land. But then the communism took all the land back, um, and make them into communes. And then Mao had this idea of trying to using central planning, and using that, he wanted to achieve basically kind of to achieve success that people in China can get fed. So he actually organized the parents into communes, and the parents actually just work on the land owned by the government, and the government provided them with food. But it didn't last long. And then it caused a 3 year of famine right after that. And about 15 to 50 million people starved to death. And if you look all the damage, all the atrocities committed in the name of communism, including all the countries that they were became communist countries, like the Eastern Europe, like Cuba, and other countries. And about 100 million people perished. Either they were murdered or died of starvation. And more than 1 billion people were and are still enslaved. People in China, they do not have the personal freedom. The government can confiscate their property anytime the government want. And right now, they couldn't, many of them just couldn't even come out, couldn't get a passport to leave the country. And so now this is kind of my story. So I was born in 1963, and 1966, that's when Cultural Revolution happened. And so Mao actually get the young people excited, and he actually used them to because this is after the disastrous economic policy which caused the 3 year of famine. He was kind of being marginalized, and so the Communist Party hierarchy basically gave him a honorable position, but didn't want him to basically took out his take out his power. But he didn't like that, so he wants to get back to power. So he used the young people, and so the young people were organized. They called themselves Red Guards, and they're mostly a high school students and some college students, and there are also some middle school students, but mostly are high school students. So they actually went to Beijing, and they pledged their allegiance to Mao and Mao only. And so on the right, there is a picture of that's we have Tiananmen as background. I mean, all those so-called Red Guards. And then for about 2 years, 66 to 68, so I think it's about 10 million, the Red Guards. So basically they ran through the country, the whole country, different, almost all the cities are impacted. So they tortured teachers and torture intellectuals, and a lot actually intellectuals committed suicide during that time. Some very famous authors and scientists. and even musicians. And they destroyed temples, churches, statues, and ancient cultural buildings. And of course, they burned books and artworks. And the picture down below is this is outside a tomb of one of the emperors in Han Dynasty. So we're talking about almost 2,000 years ago. And those statues are supposed to mean they were uh, court officials. So basically, they are there, pay the respect to the emperor. So the red guards basically just beheaded all of them, and you can see what's left. I mean, they have no head. And there is a lot more destructions they did during that time. And then during those 2 years, all schools are closed. And so the students just do whatever they want. They basically roaming through the whole country. And now 1968 to 1977, there is something called education revolution. And in the West, few of us knew about it. But I was old enough. And actually I went to, started my elementary school in 1960 when I was about 7 years old. So all the textbooks, old textbooks before the Cultural Revolution were banned and destroyed. And all the books are new. And so when we studied the language textbooks basically are just collection of Mao's quotes. So the first thing I learned is long live Chairman Mao and long live Chinese Communist Party. And also in sciences books like physics, chemistry, and all that, math, then all the Western names were erased. For example, Newton's laws were not called the Newton's laws. They're called, for example, is number 1, number 2, number 3 laws of physics, because the Westerns are the capitalists and the colonialists, so they are bad people. And during those time, academics was secondary and actually was totally ignored. Everything is about political activism. And as students, we are told to wake up our class consciousness. It's kind of like today's terminology is wokeness. So basically now we have to look through the lens of class struggle. So in the past, maybe I have some friends, classmates. We either like them or don't like them. But now I have to look at them in terms which class they belong to. Like if their parents or grandparents were landowners, now they belong to a different class. It's called bourgeois class. And we are the working class, we are the proletariats. So there is a class struggle. So they're no longer classmates, they are become our enemies. And we are supposed to be very conscious about that. And because we don't want them to come back in power. So everything is about power struggle. And then we have to criticize ourselves, because any thought are not, they call it revolutionary thoughts or proletariat thoughts, then we have to purge them. Like, for example, girls are not allowed to wear pretty dresses. And actually during those time period, and people just wear either green or gray, because green is the color for soldiers. Gray is kind of like for the workers and party officials. So that's basically 2 colors we have. And then we had to criticize our teachers, because our teachers, but at that time, most of the teachers came from the bourgeois class, because before the the Communist Party took over China in 1949, pretty much only rich people, well, not really rich by American standards. It's pretty much middle class families. They can send their kids to universities. So pretty much all our teachers came from that background. So now we treat them as our enemies. So well, some of them, if they decided to, they want to become part of the proletarian class, then they had to prove themselves. So at that time, the teachers actually were scared of us because we can report on what they said or what they did, and especially what they said, then that could they could get in trouble, and they could even get arrested. And then we are told to criticize our parents because our parents from the old generation, so they are in a way contaminated by bourgeois thoughts. So we were, trained to become revolutionaries. Now, in today's terminologies, so-called social justice activists or social justice warriors or anti-racists. And there's a poster here. It just shows the Red Guards after they caused damage in the society from 66, 68. Now they are getting back to schools. So the slogan said is, let's get back to schools and carry out the revolution. And that's pretty much what we did during those years. There's really very little learning. Everything we did is, to criticize our classmates, our teachers, our parents, and then we go to the countryside to help harvesting. Then we go to factories, supposedly help the workers. Actually, we probably caused more trouble for them. But there's very, very little academic going on at that time. So because that background, now we're going to talk about my second story. And because my background during the Cultural Revolution, and when I heard about diversity, equity, inclusion officer in May this year, we know that the Kamakale School District hired such an officer, and state of Indiana also have diversity, equity, inclusion officers. And when I heard about that, that's kind of remind me of my experience. And those officers remind me something called commissar. Commissar is a Soviet invention, and you see the picture on the right. So as a commissar, which is a political officer, their responsibility is to basically assign to every unit in the army, and their responsibility is to basically watch out the military officers and also indoctrinate the soldiers. So basically help them is to help indoctrinate the soldiers that they are supposedly fighting for better society. They are supposed to fight for their proletarian class against the bourgeois, against the rich people. And that's basically what commissar does. So when I heard about the officer, that reminded of that, because we had that experience back when we were in schools. We have people like that who came to our schools, basically teach us how to criticize our teachers and how to help us to have this class consciousness. Of course, now it's called race consciousness. So now everything you have to look through the lens of race struggle. And there is actually a famous picture talking about what's the difference between equity and equality. So equity, that's what we used to think, that's what about America. That's what's so great about America, because people have equal opportunities. But that's not what they want. What they want is called equity. Equity means you have the same outcome. So if you are tall enough, you don't need anything. If you are short, then you get double the resources. So the resources actually is redistributed, supposedly to reach the same outcome. But the same outcome, that is communism. And so when I heard about equity, that's the first thing that came to my mind is communism, because that's the communist utopia, is that everybody have the same. Basically, there is no private property. Everything is controlled, is belong to the community, and the people just basically take what they need. So everybody had the equal outcome. And of course, this never happened in any communist country. It's you never get equal prosperity. You only get equal misery. But anyway, that's how what got me into my search to find the root of critical race theory. And before that, actually, I heard about it, but never paid attention because people just saying, okay, especially the media, the left media, I say, oh, just some kind of theory in college, in law school. There's no big deal about it, but actually, it is a big deal. As the more the research I did, the more I realized that how big a deal that is. And right now, we just see what is happening to K through 12 schools. So anyway, that's my starting point, is look at the diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm looking at what that means. So I went to Central Grove School District. That's my school district. And we look into their resources, school resources for parents and students. And by the way, this webpage was taken down. But at that time, it's there. It's kind of just supposed to help parents and middle school and high school understand what it means by equity. So if you notice, there's two books, very famous. One is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Another one is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. So I bought the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Now, Ibram Kendi actually came from a middle-class African-American family. And in this book is actually part of biology, autobiography, part of autobiography, part of his political principles. And so he was talking about his journey from, he called himself from a Black racist to an anti-racist. So his main ideas in his book is, first one, America is inherently racist. That means in America's foundation, America's law, America's all the social institutions, everything is basically racist. And that's what they call systemic racism. And how does he prove that? His proof actually is he looked at disparity between races, and that's his proof. He couldn't actually find any current policies which is racist, but he was looking at the what's happening in a society. For example, the prison population. What's the percentage of blacks in the population? What's the black percentage of white? And so there is disproportional blacks are in prison. And so that's his proof that America is inherently racist. And that's all he needs. And of course, there are other things like in a society, how many CEOs are black, or how many business are owned by black. But he basically doesn't look at any other factors, and the race is the only factor. And so to him, that's good enough. So that's what why he believed that America is inherently racist. And then as a person, like say, and we are either anti-racist or racist. So there's no in between. So now you have to be anti-racist in order not to be a racist. So you cannot say has nothing to do with me. I'm not a racist, but then he'll argue that have you do anything to change the current system, because he didn't think the current system is racist. If you didn't, then you are a racist by definition. And so he changed the definition itself, what means by racist, what means by racism. So basically, if you don't, if you're not an anti-racist, then you are racist. So if you don't agree with him, then you are racist. But his solution is very radical. So his solution to change America or transform America to a better society or better country is to use racial discrimination. So basically he said that the only remedy is to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. That's a quote from his book. So basically now, instead of that colorblind, so any policies have to be evaluated at does it help blacks to achieve a certain percentage. If the policy does not do that, then that's a racist policy. So basically, you're going to discriminate on the white people or maybe other race ethnicities, and especially discriminate on white people. And to him, that is good. To him, that is so-called anti-race, because that somehow balanced and not balanced, somehow make the decreasing the disparity. So if like say, I think right now blacks about 15%, maybe white is about say 60, 70. So basically what he wants to see that in the prison, there's about 15% white blacks and about 60, 70 are white. And if that, then that's good. That's not racist. So that's his kind of worldview. And another radical idea central in that book is capitalism is essentially racist, and the racism is essentially capitalism. So basically, he's going to abolish capitalism, because capitalism caused this disparity. And so when I was reading this book, to me, like, why schools actually promote this book? And anyone reading this, how could anyone accept this? So in order to find that, I looked at how Kennedy was educated. I mean, those ideas is not, he didn't come up from, by himself. He was, like he said, he was so-called black racist. What he mean by that is because when he was, before he went to college, he believed in Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr. So that means we want to have the colorblind society. But to him, now after he went to college, have this graduate education, now that kind of belief is a racist. I mean, so that means something happened in university level, at the university level, in colleges. So that's where I got into looking at critical race theory. So I kind of did research on that, and just a little bit of history behind the critical race theory is that it was actually originated in the mid 70s in the law schools. This is called critical legal studies. So basically, they believe that America's legal system is inherently racist, even though there is no law, anything like that, which has a race element. They just look at what is happening in the society because they find more blacks in prison, and more blacks have a harsher sentence than the white. So it's compared with white. So they think the system actually is treat white and blacks differently. And so that's how they're looking at the law. So they don't believe, like we call the justice blind. They don't believe that. They think that justice blind, if we treat everyone the same, then we end up, the blacks get the short end of it. So they want to change. They want to change how the law in America, the policy, I mean the laws and how the laws was administrated. But it didn't really take much hold. I mean, there's some people in the law schools was talking about that, but still tiny minority. But in 1989, something changed. There is a first meeting was held and attended by 24 scholars of color. And that's the first time critical race theory was coined. But it draws a lot of materials and resources and studies from critical legal studies. And then afterwards, they published many books and papers. Now, in 1995, CRT was introduced to the field education by Gloria Lanson Billings. So here's a couple of pictures here. Derek Bell is considered the father figure of CRT, and he was pretty big on critical legal studies. And he has a lot of influence on people like Barack Obama. When Barack was in law school at that time, and then there has Richard Delgado and Kimberly Crayson. Actually, Kimberly Crenshaw coined the name critical race theory, and now it's just catch on fire. And now it's taught in education, political science, women's study, athletic studies, communications, sociology, and American studies and theology. So anything like used to be called liberal education, anything to do with humanity. Now that theory is basically permeated in pretty much every field. So here's the major talent of the CRT. First of all, race is a social construct. Is socially constructed to benefit the whites at expense of POC. So to them, the way they look at that is so-called zero sum. So if you just one piece of pie, I mean, or maybe a pizza, then if someone got more slices, means the other people get less slices. So that's how they look at things. They think the whole society is institutions, legal systems, and all that were built to benefit the white people. And so first, that's what I think the race actually was created by the white people to suppress and to exploit people of color, POC. And the second one is the racism is normal, not aberrational. That means it's not just isolated cases, it's everywhere. And that's why it's called systemic structural racism, all everywhere. The way they look at this see racism in every aspect of American society. And also the critique, the liberalism, the classic liberalism. For example, rationalism. They don't believe in object truth. Everything is subjective. They don't believe that legal equality. They don't believe colorblindness. They don't believe meritocracy. Like you get you make more money because you know you have the ability and you actually was able to do more things. Or if you have high, I mean, if you work hard, you can move up. They don't believe all that. And and also, okay, 1, 2, 3. Now, the fourth one is intersectionality. So that means every individual is not an individual. They don't believe in individuality. They believe that every person is identified by membership in a group or multiple group. So everything is look in the unit is not individuals. The unit is groups. And the last one is that only people of color are qualified to speak on behalf of other members of their groups. So basically, if you are white, there's nothing you can do. You're just being, a racist, and you could not even trying to help people of color because you don't have, they call the lived experience. So for them, is all things about storytelling. It's not about the reasoning. Reasoning is part of the classical liberalism, is that it's their subjective truth, is that they feel they are suppressed. They feel that they are being discriminated. They feel that they are being looked down. So therefore, that must be true. So if you are white, you don't have that. So there's nothing you can say or do. You basically just admit your guilt, and so therefore, the best they can do is trying to help them, the people of color, but you cannot speak on behalf of them. Okay, now we're looking at what they want to do. Their goal is to build an equitable society with equal group outcome. We're not talking about individuals, which is Marxist utopia. Marxism, communism, there is no individuality. Everything is for the common good. Like in Facebook, we're talking about community standards. And they use racial discrimination against the called current and perceived racial discrimination. And they are very anti-capitalism, and they are anti-classical liberalism. And they are definitely anti-Western civilization, which they consider is white supremacy. And by the way, that's all in their publications, in their books. And it's not something I came up, it's something based on what they said, but what I read from their own books, their own publication. And it's anti-Christianity, because Christianity is part of the Western civilization, and they look at Christianity actually to give the white people the advantage, help the white people to explore people of color, especially the blacks. And all it comes down to is black supremacy. And we talk about the Kennedy. His hero is not Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King to him was a racist. His hero is Malcolm X, and Malcolm X was a black supremacist. And in early days of Malcolm X, he actually not, I shouldn't say early day, most actually, his career, Malcolm X is very military and radical. And that's where you see the clenched fist of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, now is not a secret. Their leaders were Marxists, and they actually openly admit they are Marxists. And the clenched fist is actually a Marxist symbol. So when I see that, first time I see that, I knew, actually I was very, very concerned. Because once communism came to America, it will only cause destruction. And then kind of look at deeper what caused the critical theory, because those people were, the theorists were mostly professors, but they were influenced actually when they were college students. And so that actually got to this person, Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse, very influential. He actually was called the father of New Left. If you are old enough, you remember the radical 60s, and he was a big influence to those radical college students. He actually a key member of the Frankfurt School. And those radical college students, most of them actually became professors in law schools and school education, and they in turn indoctrinated many future professors and a lot of educators, and especially professors in education schools. So I'm going to give you a couple examples, and some of you may know about these two persons, and that's the 60s radicals. They want actually to bring communist revolution in America. Mao was their one of their heroes. But then they died. They went away in the 70s, 80s. It seems like they are gone. But they are gone from the limelight. But they all went to colleges, went to universities. So just give you two examples. One is Tom Hayden, who is one of the founders of Students for Democratic Society. And another one's Bill Ayers. He is one of the founders of Weather Underground, which was a terrorist group. They actually bombed federal buildings. And so both of them went to, like Bill Ayers, after he's finished his prison sentence, he actually became a professor. I think he's in University of Chicago. And his specialty actually is elementary education. So they actually influence many K through 12 teachers. And then we're going to, so from that, I traced down to the Frankfurt School, because they are known for this critical theory. That school was started in Germany, and they used to be called Institute for the Study of Marxism. They are the so-called Western Marxism. So their philosophy, which is different from the Soviet Union Marxism or Chinese Marxism. And so they look at what's happened in Europe, especially West Europe and America. They found that Marxism didn't work. So they realized that the reason it didn't work is because the classic original Marxism focused on class struggle. So basically the bourgeois and the proletarians. So bourgeois are people with properties. Um, the proletarian are supposed to be the working people, the workers and peasants, which have no private property. So they kind of they work, so they got paid, wage earners. Um, but that was not the truth, especially not true in America, because most workers at that time they became middle class. They have house, they had house, they have car, they have their own stock. So that actually they are part of the bourgeois class. So that's why the class struggle did not work. And but they look at it, they said, okay, um, it might work with group struggle, like between like black and versus white, and between man and human. So that's why radical feminism actually was influenced by them too, and also is ethnicities between different um, um, ethnic groups. So that's their focus, but the goal is the same as the classic Marxism, is to liquidation of Western civilization. They wanted to destroy it, especially Christianity. And but in the 30s, remember I mentioned that in Germany at that time in the 30s, is really a struggle between the Nazis and the communists. So Nazis won the basically they destroy the communists. So they are being forced out from Germany, and they transplanted to Columbia University. Now, Columbia University is very important because its teachers' college is the oldest school of education. So they actually trained many professors, and those professors went to different other different universities and colleges. So Columbia University is very, very influential. The school, the teachers' college, very, very influential about, all those education philosophies and the methodologies and all that. Anything like they study in colleges. Um, so they have a huge influence, especially through Herbert Marcuse. But then from there, I traced their influence to this guy, Antonio Gramsci. Actually, the critical theorists also attribute their influence by this person. Actually, before my research, I didn't really know about him, but he has huge influence on the Frankfurt School. He was a leader of the Communist Party of Italy, and he actually went to Russia, and he saw what happened in under Stalin, and he actually escaped from Russia because he feared that he would be arrested by Stalin, and so he actually, and then when he went back to Italy, he was arrested by Mussolini and put in prison. And in the prison, he has time to write. So he write volumes of his philosophy, political philosophy. So there he came to realize that in order for communism to be successful or to succeed in the West, especially in America, they cannot do that through violent revolution. So they cannot do the same thing. They cannot do the same thing as what happened in Russia and China. They have to do different approach. So his approach is to use a slow progression of changing the culture. So that's why they have the name cultural Marxism, to change the culture, because he realized that the reason Marxism didn't work in the West is because in the West, the workers, the so-called proletariat, were influenced by the church and influenced by the culture that they. That's why they don't accept communism. That's why communism, like American back then, people rejected communism. So so for them, for communism to work, then they have to change the culture first, so that once they change, after they change the culture, then they can use the dem, democratic means to change the society. So that's a huge influence to the Frankfurt School. Now, his strategy is to have communists to become professors and to take over higher education and indoctrinate their students to become social activists. Then they can influence K through 12 education, influence the media, influence church, and influence entertainment. And eventually they're going to overthrow capitalism through democracy. Well, that's actually our, for the Western society, the Achilles heel is that once you have enough people vote for socialism, then you cannot, then it will snowball from there. And that will eventually will lead to communism. And it's very hard to get back. And I think we are actually really at this critical moment now in America. So that really, we can say he really the founding father in a way of the critical race theory. And so now can just summarize that. What is critical race theory? First of all, it's not an academic theory. And they said that. They said, I mean, if you read their publication, they don't even call that academic theory. It's a movement. And it's a neo-Marxist worldview. So instead, class struggle, they are now looking through the group struggle, the group identity. So identity politics, and it's a new variant of communism. And it's a continuation of cultural communism, is how they influence the culture and then they influence society. And they, I think next time, if I can, definitely want to interview Jennifer McWilliam. She was talking about social emotional learning. There is actually a infographic of the social learning is actually how they influence the students and then spread out to their families and eventually spread out to the society. And that's how their strategy. And it's really, in a way, a secular religion. The people, they are the activists, they do have this religious zeal, and they have a religious energy. I mean, they are willing to fight. They are willing to sacrifice. So that's what a critical race theory is. And now we see that. We see what's happening. So they controlled the higher education first. It took them about 20 years to do that. And now they're going to push down to K through 12 schools. And they already control the media, entertainment, and even seminaries. So now they're pushing down, and not in public schools. A lot of private schools say the same thing. And now in Indiana, we know Kamaklee School District, Brownsburg School District, Center Grove School District, Greenwood, Franklin. You can put down many now school districts has been affected. And social emotional learning is used as Trojan horse. And they call it leverage. I mean, they didn't even hide it. They use that as a leverage to uh, bring, basically to change the society, and to make an equitable society. And one of the things is they have this diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, and use them to influence the teachers, to indoctrinate the teachers, and then indoctrinate the students. And America's largest teachers union, National Education Association, recently, I think in July or June, they passed a resolution to push CRT onto all K through 12 schools. So when schools says that they are not teaching CRT, they are technically right. But so they're kind of hiding behind the semantics. They do not teach CRT as a subject, but everything they teach is through the lens of CRT, because CRT is a worldview, is ideology. So that permeates every subject, even now get into math. So what can we do as Christians? And first of all, we know, as Christians, we know this spirit is an evil spirit, is a spirit of Satan. So that's why they have the power and energy behind this movement. And now we know that spirit now is haunting America. And they want to enslave our children via public and private education. And we have to fight against it. And as Christians, as parents, we have to get involved in education, school board meetings, curriculum reviews, and school board elections. Those as parents, that's our right. And our children's future, our churches, and our republic are at stake.